There we are. Hello and welcome to our new webinar. My name is Brendan. I'm your friendly neighborhood, webinar host, customer experience guy, director of being cool. Today is our agility story and the evolution of CMS. So we've got our CEO, Jon, joining us. Feel free to introduce.
Hello. Founder of fun. Try to bring fun into everything we do here at Agility, or actually just everywhere.
Starting with that cool background that's been following you around for a while, huh?
Yeah. It's a graffiti thing that we did years and years ago in an office. This graffiti guy we hired to do graffiti all over the place, but he was like, well, if I do that and you move, you lose it. Right. So we did it on these big pieces of canvas, and now I'm lugging around these, like there's one over here that's like 8 feet by 5 feet, and like this piece here that says it's that easy, but it's really hard to read.
That's news to me. I didn't know that there was multiple ones.
Oh yeah.
Okay, well, now I want to see the other ones. Now I'm curious.
We'll get the other one out. One's the big cat with our old logo. It's a big, huge cat. This is
cool. I want to see that. All right. Yeah. Awesome. So the topic of today's webinar is that we want to talk about the people behind agility. So we're showcasing yourself today, Jon, but then also just talk about the history of agility. And this is going to be a multi-part webinar series. So we're going to do this in 3 parts. The first one will be, like I said, around like the history of agility, kind of like how yourself got into technology and into the content space. And then to tease a little bit of the future, we'll talk about kind of where agility is at now and how things have been going. And then also what the future of agility looks like. What does the future of the web look like in general when we get to part 3, which will be really cool. So make sure that you're following us on like LinkedIn, make sure you're subscribed on YouTube. And as always, this is also a webinar and a series and a conversation with yourselves. So if you have any questions, feel free to like leave them in the comments and we'll respond to them as we go. You can always interrupt us. But to get started, why don't you just, I guess, give a little like intro about yourself and like how you got into technology.
Yeah, so Jon Voigt, a co-founder actually, technically, of Agility. I started it with an old high school friend. And I originally got into technology at a young age, just playing with computers and hacking little things to write programming code in Visual Basic and things like that. And I went to school in Guelph in Ontario, near Toronto there, for engineering, software engineering, which wasn't really coding per se. But as you went through, there was software engineering courses and different things, and I got more into developing on my spare time, and started getting some jobs outside of school, and it just kind of spawned from there until Agility started.
And what is the difference between software engineering and coding? For my own personal curiosity.
Yeah, great question. Yeah. So engineering is more about the architecture and how you put things together. It's also about a standard of building solutions. So whether it's a bridge or whether it's a piece of software, there's ethical ways to do things. There's, double checking, dotted your I's and crossed your T's for safety. In the case of a bridge, in the case of software, less bugs. So software engineering is much more focused on how should you architect a system that's scalable, expandable. And there was chip development and assembly coding, plus the history of coding, where it came from, and different types of programming languages, just like the evolution of stuff. Very theoretical.
That makes sense. That's cool. Yeah. I've always kind of like used them interchangeably as like a non-technical person. I don't think I've ever really like dove into like what the difference actually is.
Yeah, developing is like the core, like I'm writing code. I'm writing out, I have a solution already. And software engineering could be like, I'm talking to the customer to find out what they want to do and making sure the end result did that.
So how did you kind of transition? Yeah, that makes sense. How did you kind of transition from engineer to developer?
During school, during engineering, I took a bunch of courses, between my courses during the summer, I just took jobs developing. Yeah, I was working as a contractor or consultant or whatever, just doing programming. And I programmed a little bit before that, just before school. Cool. Playing around in high school.
So why do you think it's important to kind of like revisit the early history of agility now?
Interesting. So obviously, I think a lot of people listening here are in the content space or related to CMSs and things like that. And there's been so many types of CMS platforms over the years, and we've kind of been through them all. None of these systems are perfect for everyone. There's tons of different types of people, and it's just so hard to pick the right system. But I think the history of not just agility, but also agility and how we've moved through with the industry can help us predict where things are going and help us make better choices because we understand, okay, this was happening here, this was happening there. Why did people move from here to there? Oh, they did that. Okay, well, what might come forward in the next few years, right? Customers' needs in the CMS space, it's kind of scary to say, but haven't changed that much. They have the same type of things they want to do. They want to update content. They want to publish a website. They want to move faster on some campaigns. Obviously, there's little things now with AI and all these things that people are saying are new needs, but AI is just a more efficient way to do a lot of those things. It's the same core need. But I do think we're on a verge and a shift coming up where kind of like we went from CMS, DXP, headless, composable, we have all these different terms and ways systems have kind of changed, solving the same problems different ways. I think there's a potential for AI to massively shift how systems are used. And because of that, now is a good time to look at the history of where things have been going to try to envision where it might go. We've been a bootstrap company since day one. And because of that, it's harder to compete with some of the players out there that have a ton of money or a ton of investment. And so we've had to be more innovative. We've had to be closer to our customers to really see what they need and dive into that stuff. And so I feel we have a unique perspective on the industry and how it's changed because we didn't have the ability to just jump on every bandwagon and try every different thing. We had to like really choose wisely type of idea. So, and I think that's the history has helped us do that. So it's cool for people to hear where the industry's gone, where we've gone, so that we can either guide people more going forward, or they can give us their opinion where they think things are going, and we can have the conversation.
Yeah, you had mentioned the kind of like the potential of how AI might affect the space. Do you think it's more potential or just inevitability?
It's inevitable that it's going to change the space. Yeah, maybe I used the wrong word there for sure. There's going to be some major changes, and there's everything from like content creation and managing platforms to, I'll throw some crazy things like maybe websites will be gone. Maybe we consume content completely in a different way. I don't think that's tomorrow, but the way we consume content is going to change because there's going to be this layer between us and either companies, data, content, information, all these things.
Yeah, that's the perfect plug-in spoiler for part 3 when we come back to that.
There you
go. Yeah. Cool. So what would you say like drew you into technology and into the content space?
Yeah, so I've just always been interested in technology as a whole. I love technology and I love looking at where the future's going and that type of stuff. School was part of my technology kind of realm, but I wasn't much in the content space during that phase of life. When I graduated and started working, I only worked for a couple of years before we started Agility. And when we started Agility, which little tip, it was actually called Identity. So for those who, I don't know if anyone's listening and knows that, but way back it was called Identity, not Agility. And we were building any type of application that somebody would want. So it was like a consulting agency kind of thing. We were building risk analysis tools, websites, little portals, little tools for your computer. And Mike and I, who started it, veered more and more towards the website content space because we had a lot of other friends that had agencies or other things. And it was like, hey, let's work together. Let's do these things. And so many customers needed those things. And it was the customer need that kind of drew me into the content space because customers were like, we have so much content, or we want to have so much content. Like this was back in early 2000s when blogs were 2002. I don't even think blogs were out. Like it was so early on in website development, right? And there was all these different platforms called Fusion and what was that other one that was plugged into the browser, like more animation wise? I'm totally drawing a blank here.
I can't help you.
Yeah, someone on the channel should write it in there. Flash.
Oh yeah.
So you have that the Flash, and your people, someone will go to Flash, but then they're like, but there's no SEO this way. Like there were so many different problems then that we still have the same things. We still care about SEO. We still care that you can view this content on every type of device. We're just better at it now. right? So it was the customer need that drove me realizing there's an actual need in the content space, to be able to update content, to be able to publish content, to be able to like go back quickly and do things. So that kind of pushed me into that space.
Nice. Were there any like early jobs or projects that shaped how you thought about content in the web?
Interesting. I would say just before agility even started, I worked at another company that did a whole bunch of different types of solutions, a lot of IBM solutions with Lotus Notes and WebSphere and all these different things like that, which is like way back. And that was around 2000, 2001. I went to a conference in the States, an IBM conference, and they were talking about web services. Like this way to like transport information from one spot to another on a standardized kind of SOAP or XML protocol. And it was just a standard to be like, now we can actually get systems working together and sending stuff around. And I remember coming back from that thinking about like having a whole bunch of systems that were just communicating together and transferring data. And we actually built a layer on the base of agility called Data Connect, which was a layer that transferred data between databases and applications.
Cool.
And then our first version of agility was called Web Connect. And we had this picture of agility in the middle with all these lines going out to a phone, to a website, to a TV. And this was 2002, 2003. Like this was way back. Before there was headless, any of this type of stuff. And the idea there from that conference was that you decouple applications, they're stateless, you're able to transfer things around. And it's really, that was like the first vision of like a headless type of model where it's like your website's just one possible destination. And so, fast forward to from that conference into agility, when we first started thinking about the platform and people wanted to update their content, right on the first architecture, it was decoupled, so it was headless. We had models of content because you couldn't just think of a page. This could be going to a phone or something else. And we were a SaaS, software as a service. It was hosted in our private cloud. We had this little private cloud. So that's how the original architecture started and kind of bloomed from there.
Was there even like a term for headless yet?
Say that again, sorry?
Was there even like a term for headless CMS yet? Or headless?
No, it was just APIs. And to be honest, we hid that. So we built an SDK that communicated over those APIs, but we didn't sell it like that because nobody would understand that. They didn't see the benefit. It was kind of like, it took a long time for people to catch up to that. Even SaaS, software as a service, we would sell the services, we would sell the licensing as like a service package.
Yeah.
And so it wasn't like, this I'm buying software. I'm buying, they just built a website for us because we had the agency arm and they're providing us an interface to manage our stuff. A lot of people at the first didn't even know there was an API going back and forth. They didn't know that they were paying specific for a license for software. It was the support. It was the, access of hosting. It was a whole bunch of things bundled in. But it was really the first step of, really shaping how we looked at content and web distribution and things like that. And any clients that came to us that had multiple websites, the shared content, things like that. It was like a no-brainer. It worked awesome.
Did you have a moment when you realized like, this is the kind of problem that I want to spend my career solving?
That's interesting. I don't know if there was like a tipping point that was like, oh my God, like I have to like solve this forever. This is such a big thing. But as I said, I was a developer when we first started the company. And we had customers coming to us and saying, before we kind of built the initial kind of versions, oh, we gave you content to update for like a paragraph of content for the homepage. And we did a spelling mistake, or we had to rephrase it. And sometimes these people would come back like 3 or 4 times in a week being like, oh, you got to tweak it again. You got to tweak it again. And as a developer, I just want to code, right? I don't want to deploy and deploy. Deployments back then weren't the smoothest things either. It was like FTP up to web server and all these different things. It was like very archaic compared to what we have now. And so I was just like, so my internal need was like, I just don't want to manage content for people. and why the back and forth and the handing off of content, they totally lost, things got lost. It wasn't smooth. Like, why can't this person do it themselves? So I was like, we got to solve this. Like, this has to be like an easier job, an easier task. And customers were frustrated too. They were like, I don't want to wait for you to update this content. What do you mean you're busy for a couple of days, or you're on vacation, but we have to update this homepage thing really, really quickly? So the customer frustration, the frustration on my side just meant I was like, this has to be solved. And I didn't think it was rocket science. It was just like, there has to be a place someone can log in and change it.
It's crazy to even think now that was a problem that existed. Like, obviously it was. Like, a developer had to write the code, and that content had to be inside of that code for it to display on a website. But you don't even think about it as being a problem now because we're so far removed from it because of things like agility.
I want to say 80% of websites back in like 2000 were just, the entire thing was written out in code, including the content. There was no separation of those two things for a lot of websites.
Which is crazy because they're wildly different roles. And you think that it would have been something that was solved right out of the gate, and that's something you had to think about later.
I think websites were just so simply before pre-2000, websites were pretty simple, right?
Yeah,
and people were just like, write all the content, give it to a developer, have them code it. And then it wasn't as much thought around, this has to change until people really started to market and do campaigns and do things where the website was almost a live entity, right? Like, I would say that's one thing that's changed over the years, is like, it has to be a living entity now, 100%, but it wasn't like that originally.
Yeah, I think that kind of like segues into my next question, which was like, what were the problems with CMS at the time? And
lots of things.
Yeah. just based on the conversation we're already having, lots of things.
Yeah. Well, there was only so many at that point, but there were a lot coming out around that time. They were hard to use. So every single one was its own proprietary way to use it, its own proprietary coding. So you coded on top of the CMS. And so they were coupled together. They produced their own HTML. So you couldn't control what the output was. So you'd have SEO issues. You'd have layout issues with like people, like even CSS back then was very basic. A lot of people used tables to structure things, and tables were terrible for indexing and going through and resizing. There was no such thing as responsive design and those type of things. That's all happened over those years. Trying to share content or have multiple sites that shared content, good luck, right? Everyone would just duplicate the content. And then if you did a rebrand or you did a massive product push, you were kind of looking at like a whole new deployment, almost starting from scratch. So things were slower, harder to use. You had to have special skills to use the CMSs. In some ways, maybe that was better for the CMS companies because people were super sticky. There's like, you can't go anywhere. You've spent this time learning this big platform. You got to keep using it. But it's like today, when you think about how quickly marketers can roll out new things or change just the title or SEO properties on a page, that stuff took time back then. It was tough.
Yeah, and now it's just like second nature. Like it's obvious. Like the tools that we have and the features that we have seem just obvious. Like they should have been there the whole time.
We still needed them then, and we still need them now. So that's why I was saying before about the customer's need.
Yeah,
it doesn't like it's just way easier now, so we can do way more, and then we also expect way more from our teams and from people to roll stuff out, right? So if you go back and say, oh, it's going to take, you give me all the content, it's going to take me a week to get it published, someone's going to push back nowadays. But back then it would be like, oh, you can get it done in a week. That's awesome.
Yeah, no kidding.
Yeah.
When did you, because I know like the structure of agility has kind of changed over the years too. When did you decide to pivot to SaaS, and how has that been different?
Yeah, so interesting. Like technically we didn't really pivot because we were already there, right? Yeah. So we were SaaS and cloud from day one. And as I said before, we bundled that in and kind of hid that a little bit. And then as the industry has been more comfortable with SaaS and more comfortable with cloud, we made bigger leaps to make it more cloud-based or, more public, that this is SaaS licensing for the product. So when when we originally launched the solution, we had our own data center. It was in our office. We then moved to Q9 Networks, which was like a bulletproof, like top of the line bank data center in downtown Toronto. Fingerprint identification, retina scan, like to get into the server, super secure. But we wanted to make sure we were like premium from day one.
Yeah.
And so we had our own private data center within there with our own servers. We had to manage all those things. And then we moved to Azure when Microsoft launched that around 2008 to 2010 is when they were in beta versus going to production. So we migrated to that to get rid of the data center so we didn't have to worry about the hardware and things like that. So we had these steps. And around that same time, we really launched this idea that we were SaaS, like the term SaaS came out. So it's like, we're software as a service. Here's our licensing model. You pay for the product licensing, you pay for your support separately. If you're going to build a website or whatever, that's called totally separate as well. And then we actually technically, if you look at the history, we became a full SaaS product company only in 2019. Yeah. So all the years before that, we had the agency division and the product. So we were a hybrid of the two, which was really great for some customers because they'd come to one shop and get everything done. But really hard for us when we're kind of bouncing back and forth. Like, what are we focusing on now? Are we building the site or we're building the features to the product? And sometimes we had to borrow resources to accelerate some product development or accelerate a solution that's getting behind schedule or something, or just a really big solution. And it just became really hard to juggle. And so 2019, we made that big push, 100% just SaaS product-based company. And I think it was tough for a couple of years for customers to adjust to that, for us to adjust to that. But I think after we adjusted and the customers adjusted, way better position to be able to push out more features, push out more, SaaS-based rollout of products where it's just like seamless rollouts of updates and releases, had a whole new SDK, strategy, all sorts of things to allow more customers to adopt it more just as a product. So yeah, we pivoted early, but I think the view from the customer side wasn't until later, really.
Yeah, that's fair, for sure. How did our earliest customers, speaking of customers, help shape the product?
Oh, crazy, interesting. So yeah, there's been so many customers over the years that shape the product and our trajectory. I think I said up above something about the customer led kind of like viewpoint drew us into the content space, right? Just like that, they drew us into how we should perceive the content space should be architected and work. So, one of our earliest customers, Cineplex Entertainment, we brought them on when they were being amalgamated from a whole bunch of famous players, and Cineplex Odeon and all these movie theaters came together. For them, we doubled down on shared content, workflows, high-performing APIs. When they launch a new movie, it's just a crazy amount of load. So all of those things made us realize, we need APIs that are on through a CDN and can be hit 1 million times. They're also one of the first customers that kept rebuilding their front end of their website over and over and over again. So when they first built it, it was one version. Because of the APIs, they could rebuild the front end and not change anything in the back end. And they stayed through the whole trajectory of standard website, a version of the website for mobile, a version for desktop. Responsive design came out, where it's the same version that responded to the different screen sizes. Another version was the mobile version went really, really extreme until they came out with apps, and then apps pulled in through the API. So they kept on adding these things. But the cool part was because we had that architecture that was more headless, like content modeling type system, the backend barely changed. Some parts did, but it was a lot the front end. And that really pushed us to be like, this API model is by far the best model. And then we had Chorus Entertainment back in the day. Same thing. They had country music television, Women's Network, a whole bunch of different sites that were on our solution, and they too would have huge spikes in traffic and proper caching of our SDKs and our APIs and all these different things that we built in. I think it was actually Chorus Entertainment that pushed us to have the first end-to-end SDK, software development kit, that had built-in caching, had built-in scalability, had all these things, because we just were running into problems with the scaling side of things, and we built all those things into that. So they really pushed us. And then the last thing, which was less a specific customer, the Jamstack era, when that all came around in the late teens, 2016 to 2020, I would say, Jamstack was pushing so many people to do front end development, separated from other things. We launched a whole bunch of SDKs. It really just drove our product to be more publicly headless. We were always headless. You could always connect to the APIs directly, but we really only had 1 or 2 SDKs. And that was the tipping point, being like, you know what, we need a whole array of SDKs here. And so many customers have been able to take advantage of that.
Cool. How would you say the industry has changed, and like, where do we sit now?
Yeah, so the industry is funny because we go in cycles. We will have like a version of a CMS platform, which is like a WebDB. I would say like WebDB was the first version. It's just a database in the web, and it was connecting, and you could maybe have a small little interface. Then it went to a full CMS, which was like, this is a CMS product. You build on top of it. You can update content. You can add pages, all these different things like that. We moved to DXPs, where it's like, we're not just going to do CMS. We're going to have the CMS, which is often at the core, but we're going to have e-commerce. We're going to have search. We're going to have personalization. We're going to add in all these different things. Then the whole headless space came in. And I do believe there's different types of headless. There's, where people just add an API in front and they call it headless. To me, that's not truly headless. Headless is also when you have content modeling, because the content has to be managed and entered in a way that doesn't matter about the head. So it's a structured content. So it can go to an app, it can go to a display board, it can go anywhere. So to me, headless isn't just an API. It is actually how you manage and store the content. And now we have people talking about composable, which is like on top of headless a little bit, where you're making a DXP by composing a whole bunch of solutions together, and a headless CMS or a headless e-commerce or a headless search are all kind of the parts of that puzzle. And in the mix there was hybrids. There was like all these other terms and things that came by, right? So the industry has changed in some ways less than we realize, like what people need. They all need to be changing content. They all need to be sending it to different destinations. They all need to be controlling SEO. They all need workflows and governance and all these things. They've always kind of needed those things. It's just easier to do with the systems now than we used to have. I still believe hands down headless is in the best position and the right system to support these things. But it's crazy how many people are still using WebDB type solutions, or they're still using, solutions where you don't even manage content. You just drag elements in and edit the content right in the design. Like, people are using every single type of system, because for different types of businesses, different things work. Yeah. And we definitely have to watch in terms of where it's going and where we sit now. We have to be really aware of how the consumer is consuming content. I think this is a sneak peek into some of our other talks, it's really unique how that is going to change. I really believe right now it's a website, even websites, just do a search term. What do you get? You get AI writing back the answer. Do you even go to the website for the answer anymore? You used to have to click into the link, read the website, get your answer, or Reddit or whatever. Now the summary tells you the answer. Most of the time you don't even go to a destination.
Yeah, almost never.
Imagine that gets so good that it creates its own website for you. All right. And it designs it in the format that you can absorb it. So are we getting rid of websites? Do we still need them, and AI will read them? Like, what is happening there? Unknown at this point. But we have to be really aware of the consumer, the end person that's consuming the content, and how they want to consume the content, to realize, okay, how do we manage it or distribute it in a way that works for them? So it's exciting. I think we're in for a shift in the next, couple years. And I think headless is posed good to be able to adjust to that because of the APIs. But who knows? Who knows? What will come.
That's the exciting part. Do you want to pivot quick? We're very close on time here, but we have a question here from LinkedIn. Says, we've solved all of those original pain points. People can update content easy now. Sites are living entities. Everything is way faster. But what are the new challenges or pain points you're seeing emerging now that we need to solve for next?
Yeah, interesting. So a lot of the pain points are still some of the same problems around integrating with other systems and pulling content together. So we see big enterprise run into the issue where, they have other systems they have to pull the content in, and how they bring that together in a way that's easy to manage. Technically, it's very easy to code up something to pull it all together. To manage it at the same time is not as easy. So we see that as a problem. We also see people doing distributing content to other destinations, but not knowing how to share it and control how it's shared to those other destinations. So a version of content may have 3 different versions for 3 different destinations. And so you still don't want to copy the content. So how do you manage that? So I think the biggest problem there is initial architecture, content architecture, which we put a lot of focus into. If you don't content architect properly up front and have the right structures and the right way of like how are you going to use this content, no matter what you try to do down the road, you're going to have to go back and redo that. So we put a lot of emphasis on that. And that's not a new challenge, but I still see it coming up as a problem. So it's hard to say it fits in this fully, but that is a pain point. I still see people coming in and being like, you know what, we just didn't build it right the first time. So finding the right person to build your solution and architect it is a challenge. And I think an exciting part there is a sneak peek is that I feel AI is going to be able to help us do some of those things and create some standardization around how do we actually build the content models and things in a scalable, expandable way. So I think some really cool ways to solve those problems is coming.
Awesome. I think that is a great place to leave it on. I appreciate you joining to chat. I hope everybody enjoyed it and are looking forward to the next one now that we've teased it a little bit. Keep an eye out for that. And again, if you want to get notifications for that, make sure you're subscribed to our YouTube channel. You're following us on LinkedIn and you'll see those posts. You can also join our community on Slack. But otherwise, I hope everyone has a lovely rest of your week. Enjoy your weekend. And thank you again.
Awesome. Thanks, Brendan.
All right.
Take care,
bye.
everyone.